What if I told you that everything in your life, your mind, your fate, even your health, was sealed long before you were born? A curse, passed down through generations, buried so deep in the bloodline that it becomes more than just history. What if this curse, this genetic horror, wasn't some ancient myth, but something alive today? Something that walks among us, hidden in plain sight, in the most unlikely of places. You may have heard of inbreeding before, a topic whispered about in hushed tones, often framed as something of the past, belonging to the forgotten pages of royal dynasties, to stories of monarchs desperate to preserve bloodlines. But here, in the shadows of rural America, in a place so remote it barely exists on modern maps, the most horrific manifestation of this curse lives on. They are the Whitakers, a family trapped in the grotesque spiral of genetic decay, existing in a forgotten corner of the world. Odd, West Virginia, a name as strange as the place itself. A town so isolated it might as well be a different era. No bustling city lights, no highways, no quick routes to civilization. It is here, in this decaying slice of America, that the Whitaker family lives, a family of survivors in a cruel and unforgiving cycle of isolation. Their story, however, is not one of resilience or survival. It is one of degradation, mental decay, and the suffocating grip of fate that no one can escape. And their story, it didn't start in the 21st century. It started over a century ago. Generations of farmers, of poor souls who lived off the land, carved out lives in this remote place, away from everything and everyone. For them, the world outside didn't exist. And so, as the years went by, necessity became their cruelest master. The pool of potential partners shrank. Marriages within the family weren't out of love, but out of survival. Bloodlines folded in on themselves. And cousins married cousins, uncles married nieces. And what remained was a closed loop, a gene pool so stagnant it eventually gave way to genetic collapse. This wasn't a family just struggling to survive. It was a family trapped in an endless cycle, a cycle no one could break. But for decades, the Whitakers were unknown to the world, unseen. Their suffering was their own, hidden away in the mountains. Until one day, everything changed. The moment a camera found them, everything, their misery, their pain, their horror, was exposed to the world. That moment, when a documentarian named Mark Lee stumbled upon them, changed everything. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Before this, they were just a family, silent, forgotten. And the curse was only beginning. When Mark Lee first stepped into that forgotten world, it wasn't with the intention to expose a tragedy. No, it was a simple attempt to shine light on the unseen corners of society, those forgotten by the world. Homeless people, addicts, the outcasts. But nothing prepared him for the haunting reality he would encounter in that rundown shack in the depths of odd West Virginia. He had no idea he was about to capture the grotesque echoes of a bloodline on the brink of extinction. Ray, the brother who became their voice to the world, greeted him with more animalistic sounds than human words. Timmy, the youngest, grunted in strange, guttural expressions that seemed more like the cries of a wild animal than a person. Lorraine, the matriarch of the family, hardly spoke a word. When she did, it was as if her very existence had been reduced to fragments, broken pieces of a mind long buried in the weight of history's silent cruelty. But behind the eyes of Lorraine, Timmy, and Ray lay a truth darker than any of them could speak, a truth generations in the making. You see, these weren't just the signs of genetic damage or physical deformities. These were the outward marks of something far more terrifying, the silent collapse of an entire bloodline, sealed by decades of incest, ignorance, and isolation. The world saw them as freaks, but the true horror was not in their appearance or behavior. It was in the unspoken understanding of how this family came to be this way. Inbreeding is not just about biology. It's about desperation. It's about a broken system that fails those who live outside its boundaries. The Whitakers didn't have a choice. They lived on the fringes, far from the reach of doctors, teachers, even the most basic health care. When we think of inbreeding, we think of ancient royal families, dynasties with power at their fingertips, families who inbred to protect their bloodlines, to secure thrones. But the Whitakers weren't trying to preserve power. They were trying to survive. They were simply trying to continue in a world that had long forgotten them. And so, in their world, there was no help. There was no other family. There was no option but to repeat the cycle. It wasn't some tragic twist of fate, but a curse that had been silently passed from one generation to the next in a place so isolated no one ever asked why. The consequences, though, were plain to see. It was then that the world discovered them, and the world didn't know what to do. Should they be viewed with pity, with disgust, or perhaps the hardest question of all, did anyone even have the right to expose their suffering? When that first video was uploaded, millions flooded to their screens. Some watched in awe, others in horror. It went viral. The Whitakers were no longer invisible. They were a spectacle, a dark curiosity. But beyond the morbid fascination, beyond the viral outrage, there was something that no one could ignore. The Whitakers weren't just a story, they were a mirror that forced us to look into the darkest corners of ourselves. So let me ask you this. How did this happen? How did a family of living, breathing people end up as victims of such a crushing curse? It wasn't just genetics. It wasn't just biology. It was something much darker, something systemic. And here's the unsettling part, the truth that no one is ready to hear. What the Whitakers experienced, what they live through every day, isn't just a product of their own making. It's a result of something we're all too familiar with: neglect, institutional neglect. So what does this mean for you? Well, I'll tell you this. The Whitaker family represents something far more than a genetic tragedy. They are a reminder of what happens when we look away, when we let people slip through the cracks, when we turn our backs on the forgotten and the unseen. And in doing so, we might just be signing our own future. If this shakes you, if you feel the weight of this story pulling at you, then comment below with the phrase, "The cycle continues." Say it twice to lock in what you're about to uncover. It's more than just an algorithmic play. This is about you awakening to something dangerous, a truth you weren't meant to know. Say it now, and let me be clear. This failure is not theirs alone. It is ours. But the real question you must face is this: what are you going to do about it? Because the world may have forgotten the Whitakers, but that doesn't mean we can turn our eyes away. Their story is a call to action, one that forces us to confront the systems that allow people like them to disappear into oblivion. So, if you haven't done so yet, now is the time. Comment below with the phrase, "The cycle continues." Do it twice. It's more than a call for engagement. It's the truth, the real truth. It's a choice to step out of the comfortable ignorance and into the discomfort of reality. Say it now. Don't wait. You're about to learn why this story is far from over, and why the Whitakers are just the beginning. The question that lingered, the one that no one dared to ask, is the question that remains. How much of this is fate, and how much is failure? The Whitaker family, like so many others, didn't fall into their curse by choice. They were victims of geography, of time, of a social structure that turned its back on them and left them to rot in the margins of the American dream. Their isolated, poverty-stricken world became a breeding ground for tragedy. Inbreeding, a desperate and ignorant act born out of necessity, became the unseen hand that shaped their future. And in that shape, in the twisted remnants of what was once human, the family's true horror began to manifest. Ray, Timmy, and Lorraine are not just individuals suffering from the consequences of an unfortunate genetic roulette. They are the product of centuries of silence. And this silence, this collective ignorance, wasn't just a result of being left behind. It was a systematic failure that spanned generations. What started with a lack of education, with no access to health care, with no resources, grew into something far worse. The people who were meant to protect, to guide, and to intervene allowed these families to fall into a self-sustaining spiral where the laws of nature became their only teachers. As the Whitakers' bloodline folded inward, so did the Whispers. Out of necessity, what was once forbidden became acceptable, and what was once taboo became the last lifeline to hold on to. No one was there to teach them, to warn them of the dangers, to guide them away from the dark path they were walking. They were forced to marry within their family, and in doing so, sealed their own demise. The result wasn't just physical deformities. It was the very unraveling of their minds, of their ability to connect with the world outside. But that's where things get even darker. You see, inbreeding doesn't just affect the body or the mind. It ravages the soul. It is the slow death of identity, the loss of individualism, the gradual breakdown of everything that makes a person human. And the Whitakers, in their isolation, had no concept of what was happening to them, because no one was there to tell them. They were left in a void, and over time, the world outside stopped looking. That's when the question began to creep in. Was this family born into their fate, or was their downfall part of a larger, more insidious system that wanted to forget them altogether? Was the curse they bore the consequence of their own bloodline, or was it the result of years of institutional indifference, of being abandoned in a forgotten part of America where no one cared enough to intervene? The answer is simple, but it is the hardest truth to face. The Whitakers are a consequence of our collective blindness, a reflection of a world that refused to look. They are not just genetic victims. They are the result of an entire system that failed them. And here's the truth that should make your skin crawl. This isn't just a story from the past. It's a story that's still happening, in places hidden from view, in communities like Odd, West Virginia, and beyond. The Whitakers didn't just fall victim to genetic collapse. They fell victim to a system that allowed them to exist in the shadows, unchecked, unnoticed, and untouched. And this is the real curse. Not just inbreeding, not just physical deformities, but the societal neglect that continues to fuel their suffering. The question now is, do you see them? Do you see the Whitakers for what they are? Or do you only see the grotesque spectacle of their existence? Because here's the thing. If you continue to look at them as something other, something separate from yourself, then you too are blind to the larger truth. The Whitakers represent a warning, not just about bloodlines, but about us, about our failure to acknowledge the suffering we would rather ignore. The Whitaker family didn't just exist in the shadows, they became the shadows. Their very existence was a haunting reminder of a world left behind, abandoned to its fate by the forces that promised to protect it. They were isolated, not just by geography, but by an invisible, unspoken barrier that kept them out of the reach of help, out of the reach of intervention. But why does this happen? Why does such a tragic reality take root in the deep corners of our society, left unchecked until it becomes a grotesque legacy? You see, the real horror isn't just in the bloodline of the Whitakers. It's in the system that allowed them to rot unnoticed. A system that, despite all its promises of progress, failed them completely. This, my friend, is where the true darkness lies. In the deep, hidden corners of our society, there are families just like the Whitakers, families who live and die in a perpetual state of neglect. Inbreeding? Yes, it's a symptom. But the disease, the virus that allows these tragedies to thrive, is far deeper, far darker. The Whitakers lived in a space where basic human rights, healthcare, education, opportunity, were out of reach. And this is not some tragic anomaly. This is the reality for millions of people who live in rural America, in forgotten pockets of the world where nothing ever changes, where government programs never reach, where the laws that protect the rest of us have long since been left behind. The tragedy of the Whitakers is not just their bloodline. It's the truth of a world that allowed this kind of suffering to exist in silence for so long. They didn't just marry within the family because they were desperate. They were desperate because they had no other option. No access to education. No access to the outside world. They had nothing but the land, the mountain, and each other. It's a dark reality, one that reflects the ultimate breakdown. of society itself. And it's a breakdown that's still happening right now today in pockets of America and the world over. How many more families are out there, hidden in plain sight, suffering in silence, with no one to speak for them? Now, here's the question that you're not supposed to ask. Why does this happen? Why, in a world where progress is supposed to reign, do these horrors continue to unfold? Why are there still people living in the dark corners of this country, ignored by those who have the power to help? This is not some ancient relic of the past. This is happening right now, and the reason it happens is much darker than you've been led to believe. We like to think we live in a world where progress is inevitable, where society moves forward with every generation. But in the case of the Whitakers, and countless others like them, we see the opposite. We see that progress is an illusion, that those who fall through the cracks, who live in places forgotten by time and by the systems meant to protect them, are condemned to repeat the cycle, generation after generation. And here's the hard truth. The Whitakers aren't an anomaly. They are the product of a system that doesn't care. They are a product of a system that neglects its weakest, its most vulnerable. This is what happens when we forget the forgotten. This is what happens when we allow the edges of society to crumble and decay. The Whitakers should never have been forgotten, but they were. And their story? It's a mirror. It's a reflection of a society that's turned a blind eye for far too long. It's a dark mirror that forces us to look deeper into our own hearts and ask the uncomfortable question, what have we allowed to happen while we weren't looking? If you've been shaken by this, if the weight of this reality is sinking in, then take a moment. Comment below with the phrase, "The cycle continues." Say it twice and let this truth become part of you. Because this story isn't just theirs, it's ours. And it's a warning we can't afford to ignore. By now, you should be feeling the weight of this story settling into your bones. The Whitakers, these forgotten souls, are not just tragic victims of a genetic nightmare. They are the result of something far more insidious, a broken system, a failure of society that's been allowed to fester, unseen, for far too long. Now let's face the truth. What's happening with the Whitakers isn't isolated. It isn't just happening in some remote corner of West Virginia, tucked away in the mountains where no one can see. The curse of isolation, of neglect, is spreading. It's happening in places you wouldn't expect and you wouldn't want to acknowledge. There are thousands, millions of people living at the edge of the system, people who don't matter to those in power. Forgotten families in forgotten places, whose lives unravel in silence. And it's easy to ignore them, isn't it? It's easy to look the other way, to convince ourselves that they're just the unfortunate few, or that their suffering is some anomaly that doesn't concern us. But that's the lie. That's the trap. The Whitakers didn't just come to be because of bad luck. No, they were created by an environment that didn't care. The isolation they lived in was not just geographical, it was social, political, economic. They lived in a place where access to healthcare, education, and opportunity was as distant as the stars, where the very concept of intervention, of someone stepping in to stop the cycle, was a foreign idea. And that's the part of this story that should make your blood run cold. This wasn't an isolated failure. It's happening right now, in communities around the world. It's happening where people are abandoned, where generations are left to rot in the margins, waiting for a system that will never come. The Whitakers are a symbol of this rot, a symbol of what happens when society gives up on its weakest members. And when you watch the videos, when you see the suffering etched across their faces, don't turn away. Don't let yourself be blinded by disgust, by pity, by shame. You have to understand that the Whitakers are not just victims of their genes. They are victims of a larger, systemic failure. They are victims of a world that let them slip through the cracks. They didn't just marry each other out of desperation. They married because they had no choice. They had no options, no hope. And the tragedy? It's not just their story. It's a reflection of ours, of how we treat the marginalized, the forgotten, the invisible. The Whitakers' fate is the fate of all those left behind, all those cast aside by a society too busy with its own progress to even notice the people who are falling apart. The real question is not whether this is tragic. It's whether we will ever face the truth of what it means. Will we continue to turn away? Will we continue to ignore the forgotten? Or will we begin to confront the systems of inequality that allowed families like the Whitakers to fall apart generation after generation? Because the truth is, this is just the beginning. The Whitakers are the mirror, and what you see reflected is what happens when we allow the cycle to continue unchecked. If you haven't commented yet, if you haven't spoken the truth aloud, now is the time. Comment with the phrase, "The cycle continues." Say it twice. Make it a statement that resonates with everything you've just learned. This isn't just a story. It's a warning. It's a choice. And now, it's yours to make. Will you continue to look away, or will you stand up and face what's coming next? The truth doesn't wait. Neither should you. We've come deep into this story now, and if you're still with me, it's because something within you is beginning to awaken. The Whitakers have gone from being a distant tragedy to something more personal, a reflection of a systemic collapse we'd rather not see. But we're not done yet. We've only scratched the surface. There's something about the Whitakers that forces us to confront a much darker truth. The truth that what happened to them didn't happen in isolation. No, it wasn't some cosmic accident, some random roll of the dice that led to their fate. It was a system built on neglect, on poverty, on ignorance. And that system isn't just limited to a rural mountain town in West Virginia. It exists everywhere. It's just harder to see in places where the decay isn't so obvious. In every corner of the world, there are forgotten people, families who are left to fend for themselves with no resources, no support, and no hope. And when we turn a blind eye to their suffering, when we allow these systems to continue, we make the same mistake again and again. We create more cycles, more Whitakers. The truth of their story, the painful reality of their existence, isn't just about inbreeding or genetics. It's about the failure of the human spirit, the failure to care, to notice, to intervene. It's about a society that has become too comfortable in its own progress to look at the cracks forming beneath it. And those cracks, they run deep. They run through the very foundations of our institutions, our governments, our communities. Every time we ignore the brokenness around us, every time we push the most vulnerable into the shadows, we are complicit. We are feeding the very systems that create the horrors we pretend don't exist. And the Whitakers? They are the inevitable result of this complicity. They are the ghost of a world that failed to protect them, to guide them out, to intervene before it was too late. But here's the real question. When does it stop? When does the cycle break? Can it? Can we stop the tide of neglect, or is it too late? The Whitakers story forces us to confront our own culpability. We have been part of a system that has let this happen. We've been complicit in allowing people like the Whitakers to disappear into the cracks of society, to be forgotten, to be ignored. So, I ask you again, what are you going to do about it? You see, this isn't just about the Whitakers anymore. This is about you. This is about your choices. Every time you turn away, every time you ignore the suffering of the forgotten, you are perpetuating the cycle of neglect, the cycle of abuse, the cycle of dehumanization. But here's where things get even darker. If you do nothing, if you continue to let this ignorance, this indifference continue, it's not just the Whitakers who will suffer. It will be all of us, every one of us. Because when we allow the system to keep feeding on the vulnerable, when we allow entire generations to rot in the shadows, the entire foundation of society begins to crumble. And when it does, there will be no one left to save us. This story isn't just a tragedy. It's a warning, and it's time you face it. The Whitakers are not the last. They are not alone. This is the fate that awaits anyone left behind. And once the cycle starts, there's no stopping it. If you haven't yet, I'm going to ask you to say it again. Comment below with, "The cycle continues." Say it twice. Own it. Let it sink in, because this truth is dangerous. Once you know it, you can't unknow it. The cycle continues, yes, but whether it stops or not is up to us, and time is running out. The final descent is upon us. The Whitakers' story, horrifying as it may be, is not just their own. It is a reflection of everything we refuse to see, everything we pretend doesn't exist. It is a mirror held up to the darkest parts of our society, our collective conscience. And here's the terrifying part. The mirror doesn't lie. The cycle continues, whether we like it or not. The Whitakers are not a singular, isolated tragedy. They are a living symbol of a much larger, much darker reality. A reality that happens when we stop looking, when we stop caring, when we choose to ignore the suffering around us. Their family, their bloodline, their existence. It's not some freak occurrence. It's a result of a world that has abandoned its responsibility. And when you really dig into this story, when you peel back the layers of horror and disgust, what's left is a question that looms large. It's a question you cannot avoid anymore. What happens when we, as a society, let this happen? The Whitakers, in their grotesque and tragic state, are the result of a failure that stretches far beyond their small mountain town. They are a reflection of a systemic collapse that touches every corner of our world. The same neglect that sealed their fate is the same neglect that exists in every corner of our society, in every forgotten place where people are left behind. It's not just their fate we're talking about here. It's ours. But this story is your wake-up call. It's the last warning before everything we've built comes crashing down. Because when we allow one family, one generation, to slip into obscurity without ever lifting a finger, when we allow generations to rot in the shadows, we're not just condemning them, we're condemning ourselves. We're sowing the seeds of our own destruction. The Whitakers should never have been forgotten. They should never have been allowed to spiral into this kind of irreversible decay. But they were, and the world watched. The real question is, are we going to watch again? Will we allow this cycle to continue, to spread like a virus, until there's no more humanity left to save? Or will we stand up and do something about it? I'll tell you this, the choice is yours. The moment you step away from this story, the moment you push it out of your mind and forget about it, you're complicit. You're part of the system that allows families like the Whitakers to suffer in silence. You're part of the system that turns a blind eye. But there's still time. You still have a choice. The world can't be saved by looking the other way. And the truth, the hard, uncomfortable truth, is this. You've seen it now. You've seen the consequences of neglect. You've seen the cycle that doesn't stop. So I'll leave you with one final question. What will you do with the knowledge you have now? Will you turn away, or will you stand up and demand a change? It's time to stop pretending. The cycle continues, and now it's your turn to decide whether it continues with you. If you're ready to take responsibility, to confront the uncomfortable truth head-on, then comment below with "The cycle continues." Say it twice, and know that with this choice, you are stepping into a world where the truth isn't easy, but it's the only way forward. The cycle continues, but the ending? That's up to us.